American officials later. The final details of the agreement, announced last month, are being worked out. The UK is seeking clarity on the implications of Donald Trump's plan to double tariffs on steel imports. In the city, the FTSE 100 is just reopening at 87.74. The pound buys $1.35 and €1.18. LBC weather staying quite cloudy with blustery showers, some sunny spells in southeast England later. A high of 21 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Thomas Watts.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call the Cabinet. Put your questions to the Environment Secretary, Steve Reid, now. 0345 6060 973.
Good morning. Yes, that's exactly what we're about to do. Your opportunity to call the Cabinet. It's 4 minutes after 8 on Tuesday, June the 3rd. And with an all-encompassing brief from water and water quality through to farmers, through even to fly tipping, those and many, many other for the quality of our food. There's all the brief for the man sitting opposite the Environment Secretary, or Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, to give Steve Reid his full title. Good to have you on board, Secretary of State. You're reminding me we first spent more than 20 years ago.
I'm
you
afraid
in a previous
so.
life.
We probably both looked a little bit younger then, Nick.
Probably did.
But it's good to be here.
You're in local government now. You're in a position of considerable power, and I've got to come to you. News that we heard about a little under an hour ago. What's called KKR, the huge US private equity giant, now pulling out of a potential £4 billion investment in Thames Water. Are they high and dry, Secretary of State?
Well, the important thing for listeners is that Thames itself remains stable. The government is clearly keeping a very close eye on what's going on. We're monitoring the situation, but there's no disruption to water supply. Thames have got a number of options that they're exploring. I think that's the most important point.
What are the sort of options? Are there other potential investors then, other buyers out there?
There are a number of people that they're talking to. I mean, it's for them, not for me, to oversee those conversations. We're monitoring the situation, and my interest will always be to make sure that the company is stable and that there's not going to be a disruption to the water supply, which is the thing that concerns consumers, of course.
So we're no closer now than we were last week at the government having to step in and take emergency control of Thames Water.
No, I mean they remain stable. There are very strict rules about when and how.
Stable, but bankrupt, of course.
Well, they're not at the moment. They're stable. I know. They're clearly facing a difficult situation, but it's for them to resolve it. We're monitoring what they're doing. The key thing is there will not be any disruption to water supply, to sewage supplies, to drinking water, or the operation of the company.
Okay. And lastly on that, when might we hear more?
Well, again, that's in their hands. You know, they're a private company. They're not part of the government, so it's for them to do it. We'll keep an eye on what they're doing, but I know they have a number of options on the table.
And this doesn't move us anywhere nearer to some form of nationalisation? No,
that's special administration, so there are rules around that. There has to be certain circumstances applying before that would happen. And the government's ready for any eventuality, but as things stand, Thames are a stable, ongoing company, and they will resolve their own.
So lastly, when you say
situation.
Any eventuality, the government of any eventuality, what does that mean?
What it means, if the circumstances happened with any company, any water company, where there was a breach and it would need to be put into special administration, that would happen. But as things stand, that's not applying to any company right now.
All right, let's get the headphones on and get the first call. It's Ian, and we're talking about Thames literally here. Ian in Teddington, I think. Ian, good morning. You're on the radio. Your question to Steve Reid.
Yes, good morning. Thanks, Nick. And Steve, last September, Sadiq Khan said Teddington on the Thames was too polluted, and he proposed to clean it up and make it one of the 4 new London swimming areas. At the same time, Thames Water wants to build what is locally known as the new London sewage pump at Teddington. It's dressed up as a water supply scheme. It'll cost £1 billion. It'll operate 6 weeks of the year only. It'll pump 75 million litres of treated sewage into the planned new swim location. So the first one is a visionary picture for London and the environment and cleaning up our rivers. And the Thames Water proposals reflect, in my view, perfectly the old ways of doing things that Sir John Cunliffe this morning criticised, saying that water infrastructure decisions should be made closer to the communities that depend on them.
I've got to move you to a question, Ian.
Yep,
so
three-parter. First, which one of these two are you backing? Second, what are you going to do to finally stop the arms race where water company behaviour is that they seem to spend time writing bonus schemes to get around the regulation? And third and finally, will you come down to Teddington to see this perfect example of the new world for water versus the old discredited one?
Stay on the line, Ian, Secretary of State.
Ian, thanks very much for your question. You'll forgive me, I don't know the details of the specific scheme that you're talking about, but I do know the general issues here, and you're quite right. People are furious that we ended up, last year it was, with the highest level, record levels of sewage pollution in our rivers, lakes and seas. People are disgusted. They see the statistics, but what they know is their local river, their local beach, just as you're talking about. And this government is taking action on that already, 11 months since we were elected, of course. But
it's not going to stop the water being put into Teddington, though, is it?
Well, we have to change that. This is why we're changing the whole regulatory system, because the whole thing has gone wrong. So Ian was referring there to John Cunliffe's report that's out today. But we've launched the biggest crackdown in history on these water companies. They will now face up to 2-year prison sentences, those bosses, if they are obstructing the investigations when they happen. We've got a record 81 criminal investigations underway right now into failings by the water companies. Ian mentioned bonuses. Water companies are paying themselves. I'm sure many of your listeners, furious that these water bosses were paying themselves multi-million pound bonuses.
£195,000 to Chris Weston for 3 months into the job.
Well, it's extraordinary. I think it's
the best we've got.
It's tens of millions over the last few years, and I've taken action against it, Nick, as a sign of my fury at what's going on. We've given the regulator the power they need to ban those bonuses.
Let's go back to Teddington,
and there will be announcements coming on Friday.
So the mayor, Sir Sadiq, identifies it as a potential swimming spot. Meanwhile, Thames Water are piling in, admittedly, treated sewage. I mean, this is a mismatch, isn't it?
It is a mismatch.
What are you going to do?
That sounds like a mismatch. So what we've just had today from Sir John Cunliffe,
Yep.
Who's leading the Water Commission.
Yep,
That's
an
the
interim
review.
report.
The
Yep.
review I asked for. We get the final report in a month's time, so we'll know more detail then. But he's identified failings in regulation and the regulators. It was toothless under the previous government.
So what are you going to do in Teddo? What are you going to do in Teddington?
Well, I mean, again, I don't know the situation.
Well, will you go down and meet Ian and his team?
I'll go down there if I can find time in my diary.
Okay.
I've been down to various sites across London and across the country. Actually,
but you've got the mayor,
this
a
happens
Labour mayor,
everywhere.
saying let's make this a swimming and bathing spot, and you've got the water company saying we're putting in treated sewage.
If it's treated sewage, then the issue is the extent to how clean it is when it's coming out. So there's a lot of things you'd need to understand here. But in terms of sewage going into waterways, one of the problems is we've got a broken sewage system. The previous government didn't invest to fix it. We've got £104 billion starting this year for the next 5 years that will drastically reduce sewage going into our waterways. So we're taking action already. I think it's very interesting what Sir John has come out with today about how we need to change regulation.
Ian, stay close to us on that. Let's see what progress we made, and if the Secretary of State is available, I'll make sure that I come down as well. Ian, thank you for your call. Sean's in Cornwall. Sean, we go elsewhere in the country. Go ahead, sir. Good morning. Sean, are you there?
I am here. Can you
go
hear
ahead.
me?
Yes, sorry, I think I might have hit the wrong button. My apologies, Sean. Go ahead with your question.
No worries. So I ended up getting very ill from the polluted water in Cornwall. You talk about making lots of change, but in reality, you don't seem to be doing anything. I'll keep the question simple, when are you actually going to hold these executives personally accountable? And when will we see actual prosecutions under the new Water Act?
Well, I have to say, the Secretary of State was with me last month. 81 criminal investigations have been launched. I guess this moves to, Sean, be well, get better. When are we actually going to see one go behind bars, Secretary of State?
Well, I mean, yeah, we've got 81 criminal investigations underway now. They'll work their way through the system. But we've also given the regulator and the courts many more powers than they had before. We did that through a piece of legislation called the Water Special Measures Act, which became law in February this year. But you can now get 2 years in jail for offences that the water bosses were getting away with before. We've given the regulator the power they need to ban those undeserved multi-million-pound bonuses. There will be no more profiting from pollution by the water companies with this government in the way they got away with it under the last government. And just last week, I think we saw the biggest fine in history imposed on Thames. That's because we've put more resources into the regulators, but we're also applying the polluter pays principle. So where there's a successful prosecution of a water company, they will pay the cost of that prosecution so we can carry out more investigations and get on top of failings elsewhere. All of that is action we've already taken.
All right. Secretary of State, would you go swimming in the sea off Cornwall or swimming in the river at Teddington, or allow your children to do that?
Well, I have done. So, and, what you shouldn't have to do is think twice before you go in.
Dive in at Teddington?
I would, and people do. I speak to people that go on the water. There's some people that get sick. We shouldn't have we shouldn't have to have that concern in our heads. When I was a kid, I used to be able to go to the beach down in Cornwall. That's where we used to go. My mum and dad I'd go in the sea. No one thought about what you might catch from contaminated water. And surely our kids and grandkids deserve the same today. That's why we're bringing in that £104 billion investment to stop sewage going into our waterway so we can clean it up once and for all.
Sean, get better soon. Thank you. I said that the Secretary has a wide brief from water down to the farm. David's in Maidstone in Kent. You're on the radio, David. What's your question? Good morning.
Morning, Nick. Morning, Mr. Reid.
Good morning.
At the NFU conference, your party promised to listen to farmers, to heed early warnings and show ambition in tackling the challenges that they face. So why did you, out of hand, reject the NFU and CLA's clawback proposal on inheritance tax, a plan specifically designed to protect family farms whilst increasing the tax take on your behalf, potentially raising more money than the government's current model? Where is the evidence that your policy will do better? And if you promised to listen, why did you not?
Secretary of State.
Well, of course, I recognise this has been a contentious issue, but people will be aware when the government was elected and we opened the books, there was £22 billion missing. So we had to make some changes to taxation in order to fund the investment we put into the National Health Service that has seen waiting lists fall now for 6 months in a row. But more widely on farming, and it is the case, the majority of farmers won't have to pay this inheritance tax. And those that do will only pay half the rate of other businesses. And instead of paying it all at once, they get 10 years to pay it. So I think it's still a good deal. But when I'm talking to farmers...
You think it's a good deal?
I think compared to other businesses, they're paying half the rate of other businesses and they're not having to pay it in one go. Of course, that's after a farmer's death. This is the person who inherits the farm, not the actual farmer at the time. But when I'm talking to farmers and when I'm visiting farms, what I see is people that work all the hours God sends, from dawn until dusk and beyond, often 6 or 7 days a week, but they don't make any money out of doing that. So what I've done is I've brought in the former National Farmers Union President, Minette Batters, to work with me on boosting farm profitability. That is very, very important. Now, we're already doing work to support farmers in that way. Well, we've invested £5 billion, the biggest budget for sustainable food production and farming in our country's history. We protected farmers in trade deals with the EU, with India, with the US, and given them more opportunities to export to other countries. And we're looking at how we make the supply chain
let's go back to the farm. It's a good deal, and quotes, we're supporting farmers. David, a quick response on what you've heard. David?
Well, that's just not the case. I mean, DEFRA's figures don't agree with the Treasury figures. The Treasury figures said something like 20,000 farms will be affected. The DEFRA's figures, as Mr. Reid should know, show 70,000 farms will be affected. And the problem is with it's designed to hit people investing in land and not farm the land. But the family farms, who have farmed for generations now, earn their living out of the land, and the value of the land that they work on is irrelevant to what they do for a living. And the margins they've been working on now are getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed because we have no current food policy in this country.
Let's just let the Secretary of State respond.
Of course, like as with any business or big asset like a farm, if you pass it on, at normal retirement age, you don't have to pay anything. So I think most farms will not be hit by this. But the issue, and David's talking about it there, is profitability. So the things we're focusing on, protecting farmers in trade deals, getting them good export opportunities, the biggest ever investment, £5 billion in sustainable food production and farming in this country's history, supply chain fairness, all of that is designed to put more money back into the pockets of our British farmers because we're proud of the work that they do.
All right, thank you for your call. I'm neither a farmer nor a politician, Secretary of State, but I'm a journalist. So when a story comes up that a coroner in Sheffield said that a farmer took his life because, and I quote, he was worried about implications of new regulations around inheritance tax that would see his family lose 50% of the farm, taking his life the day before the changes were due to be announced. This is the sad death of John Philip Charlesworth up in Barnsley. What does that tell you about the legislation?
Well, first of all, whenever there's any tragedy like that, our thoughts and our prayers and our hearts should go out to the person and the family of those.
Have you contacted the family?
Of those affected. I didn't know about this one, but you just said the day before changes were announced.
Yes,
so,
the coroner said that.
That's right. So, I think it's very dangerous to speculate about why tragedies like this happen.
You say you haven't contacted this one. How many have there been, and how many have you contacted?
Well, we know that there is a very high incidence of mental health in farming. I've spoken to some incredible organisations like RABI, which is a charity that works with farmers who are experiencing mental health. The rate of mental health has been growing in that sector for years, partly, I think, because farmers spend a lot of time on their own. They're quite isolated. A lot of them are working very hard and not making much money out of the work that they're doing. So I think we can help.
Worse.
Well, we can help by talking about profitability. I won't repeat the points, Nick, because you want to hear those again. But we're also investing in supporting mental health hubs in every community in the country, boosting the support of mental health.
Farmers who've taken their lives?
Well, I haven't, no, but I don't think we should speculate. Well, it's been going on, I'm afraid, very high rates in this sector for years. You can't speculate to a particular cause of that. We need to make sure that mental health is recognised and then treated in this sector and in any other sector, because it was one of those areas which was treated like a Cinderella service, and it should never have been left in that way.
I said the Secretary of State has a wide brief because now we're into fishing. Robin's in Cornwall. Robin, you're on the radio. Good morning. What's your question?
Good morning to you. Basically, under the new agreement, the SPS relaxation of regulations.
Sorry, slow down. SPS, you're going to have to help me. SPS being...
But the phytosanitary inspection.
Oh, yes, that was part of the reset. Sorry, yep, got it, absolutely. The export of goods, yep.
Okay. So for shellfish and fresh fish, etc., and the consumables in that line, the relaxation of that, do we have a date when the health certificates will be done away with?
Oh, I don't have that date yet. I think we're looking at 12 to 18 months or something like that, but I can,
What would the impact of that be, Robin? Why is this key to you? What do you do?
Well, basically, on the export of shellfish, if you export, say, on a truck of mixed customers, so 10 customers on a truck, for example, it's 10 health certificates at £86 a go.
Right.
As you can see, it's nearly £1,000.
It is.
Plus the transport expenses, which are now higher than usual because, or before Brexit, should I say, because Brexit has introduced a thing called cabotage, which stops our drivers from working on the continent.
What the reset that we heard last month, what's the impact for you? What's the impact for the industry, lastly, Robin?
The impact is that it will be easier after the 18 months, 2-year period, and then turning away of health certificates to export, and hopefully it will become cheaper to export.
Well, I hope it works.
This is the key. It's really interesting to hear from Robin, given the tradies working with shellfish. But 70% of the seafood we catch in this country gets exported, and most of it goes to the European Union. But because of all the paperwork and regulation that was in the way, the costs piled up so much that a lot of potential exporters couldn't export. So our exports overall went down by a fifth since 2018. So the reset is tearing down those trade barriers so the likes of Robin can get their great British seafood across the border and get money into their bank
And
balances.
that is to be
That's what we
applauded.
want
Well
to see.
done. But on the other side, there was concern that we allowed EU boats access to UK waters for some 12 years, Secretary of State. Why 12 years?
Well, I mean, the key point here is British fishers, as a result of this deal, have lost nothing, but they've gained a lot. Because what we've done is we've rolled over the best of the last 5 years for the next 12 years, but we've increased their access to the European markets, where 70% of the fish that they catch in British waters goes in any case. So lowering costs for export, that will boost their businesses and make sure they've got more money. We've also announced a £360 million coastal investment fund that will be supporting fishing communities. So upgrading their boats, making sure health and safety is in place. All of that will boost those communities.
Good luck
as well.
with your business, Robin. Just before we move on, is there any point you having a conversation with your senior colleague, Yvette Cooper? All the time that the French police and border authorities don't seem to want to stop people getting into the water to cross the channel, why don't we put on pause the idea that they can come into our waters for the next 12 years until they guard their waters over at Calais?
Well, I mean, on the one hand, we need to protect our economy and our exports, and that's the right thing to do. But I don't need to be having words with Yvette Cooper. Yvette is having words with the French.
They don't seem very effective words, in all honesty.
Well, I know Yvette very, very well. That will be very, very robust, the points that
1,200 people on
she's
Saturday.
making.
I know it's not your watch, but it's not a good look.
No,
the
but
Prime Minister is reportedly furious. I don't know. You'd know
well,
better.
that's right. And I think it's, one of the things that we've done since the last election is we have removed 30,000 people who had come here, had no right to be here. Those are record numbers of
people.
people.
They're not all the illegal crossings. For people,
Well, it's a mixture of people, but
how many of the ones that came on boats?
It demonstrates that we are taking action
Vanishingly low
against people who are coming into this country and don't need to be there. And it's also saving money, because you can reduce the number of people that are being put up in hotels, so that money can be spent on other things instead.
Okay, Stephen in Guildford, you're through to the Secretary of State. Go ahead, Stephen. Your question. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, my question is about littering and fly tipping. Our country lanes, our lay-bys, our motorways, and our local roads are becoming heavily littered at the moment. It's getting worse. And what I'm hoping you can tell me is what the government are going to be doing about the fly tipping and the wider issue with the antisocial littering, which we see blighting the country lanes and roads of this country. I don't want to hear just fines, because we've already got those. Yeah. They don't work because there's no surveillance, there's no enforcement. It's just not working. Okay. It's no coincidence that the local authorities are making it harder to get rid of litter and more expensive for households to get rid of rubbish. What are you going to do?
OK, let's go to the Secretary of State.
Well, there's a man after my own heart, as well as my own name there. I mean, this makes me furious as well. So you've got these waste cowboy operators that go round people's homes. They charge them 60 quid to take their rubbish away. They drive around the corner and they dump it on another road or on a field. Well, we're not going to put up that anymore. We made an announcement a couple of weeks ago. We're going to use drones to hunt down those waste cowboys, seize their vehicles, then crush them so they can't be used again. That is a punishment for those people who are carrying these things out. It is a deterrent to other people that might be thinking of doing the same things. We're not going to put up with this country being buried under an avalanche of fly tipping in the way that we've seen over recent years, and I think this is one change that will make a big difference.
So how will the drones work then, Secretary of State?
Well, they will track. We've already got a couple of councils. Brent Council in London is one of them that are already piloting this. What they do is the drones track areas where fly tipping is happening. They see the vehicles, they record them. That provides evidence that the police can use to prosecute. We're then going to support councils to seize those vehicles and crush them so that they can't be used again. That is a signal to those waste cowboys: we're not going to put up with this from you anymore.
Something that Stephen referenced, there is concern when we discuss this, and I remember you coming on, I think it was last month or earlier this year, to talk about this crackdown, and then obviously we had a conversation after your interview here. There is a sense that and Stephen touched on this, that some local authorities make some often quite high charges to get rid of a bath panel or a tyre or whatever it might be. Now, that doesn't mean you should dump them in a farmer's field, but do we need to look at local authorities and this charging structure?
Well, I think councils should be looking at their own mechanisms for what they're doing. I mean, residents, I speak to many residents in my own constituency and elsewhere. People are furious about fly tipping because it says something about the place that you should have pride in.
It's the quality of life.
Quality of life and pride in the place where you live. None of us should have to walk past dumped mattresses and fridges or whatever else it is as we're walking the kids to school or making our way to the bus stop. So councils have a responsibility to take action here, but the government itself is doing what we can can through these stronger actions like the use of drones. But we're also, just I think it was earlier this week, we banned single-use vapes, which is a major source of litter on our streets now. We are going to take action where you get single-use plastics like that quite often end up on the streets, and then they can get into the waterways, they get into the seas, they can kill wildlife. None of us want to see that, but we're taking the action.
Coming to the last minute or so, I want to take you back, if I can, to what's called the Cunliffe report. Sir John Cunliffe, former Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, and he'll talk about how in the water system there's much friction, incoherence and cost in the system comes from the way the regulators with very different remits interact. Radical streamlining and alignment of regulators is now essential. He also points to mismanagement by previous governments, and that is plural, governments. Yeah. Your reaction to what I imagine you've had sight of it, or certainly you've had the headlines of it.
Yes, I have seen his...
It's 100+ pages, isn't it?
It's 100+ pages, but it's worth reading if you're interested in cleaning up our rivers, lakes and seas, and I am. Well, this is his interim report. We get the final one in a month's time. He's inviting comments.
How much are you copping flack, not you personally? How much is this government copping any flack from what you've read, or is it all directed at previous administrations?
Well, it's the regulatory framework that's wrong. That's what we need to reset.
He does talk about government's actions, though, plural. Now, I don't know whether he means yours, because I've not seen the full report.
He's talking about
previous administrations. He's
talking about previous. We've taken action already. Like I said, we passed the special measures bill that means that we can ban bonuses and impose prison sentences for pollution in the way that we've seen. We've ring-fenced customers' money as well. This is an important change we've already made. So it can no longer be diverted for payment on bonuses and dividends, and I think that's something people will welcome. But what Sir John is saying here, we need a whole reset of regulation. We'll get the final report in a month. Happy to come back, Nick, if you want to talk about it then, because that is when we can say what the legislation that will follow will need to look like. But I'm really grateful to Sir John for the work that he's done, because this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make sure that we reset the water system so it works for customers and for the environment in the way that it has not done until now.
I can't let you leave the studio without reading you a headline I would imagine you or some of your team have already seen. We have the nation's first hosepipe ban. This is in Yulegrave Waterworks, supplying water to the area of Derbyshire. Concerns, how widespread? Are we looking at potential hosepipe bans across the whole of the country, Secretary of State?
Well, that's for individual water companies to take decisions on. We've got an oversight board now that ministers will be monitoring very closely to make sure that we are, for instance,
how close are we to a hosepipe
reducing leaks so that we don't have to have these things. It depends on the weather, to be honest, Nick. But the long-term way to fix this, we've had a very, very dry spring.
I think it's the driest on record, or certainly one of the driest
for decades. Years. I can't remember for quite how many. But what we need, the problem is, and we get a lot of rain in this country, and yet we get hosepipe bans. There were floods in Cornwall last year and a hosepipe ban at the same time. We don't have enough reservoirs. We've not built one for 30 years. So
your colleague was on, I think, last week telling me that the two are on the way, though.
There's two on the way now, but we need to speed it up. So I've taken control of planning rules around reservoirs so that we can override local authorities when they're going too slowly, get that planning permission, build the reservoirs, because if we can capture the rain that comes down in great quantities in this country, then there's enough water to make sure that in dry patches we don't run out.
And is there an issue with the number of people coming to this country? Obviously, more people demanding more water means there's more strain on the water supply. Is it the fact that there are so many people arriving in the country is another pressure?
We need to make sure that we've got enough water for the population that is here.
But is it an additional pressure, Secretary of State?
Well, there will be many pressures. I think we can look at how we reduce the amount of leakage coming out of, a lot of people will have seen the holes in the road where, leaks are being fixed. An awful lot of our water just flows out of broken pipes into the ground. So if we can stop those leaks, and some of this £104 billion private sector investment we've secured is intended to do that, we're wasting less water, and then we're less likely to run out of water when the weather gets drier.
Well, I said it was an all-encompassing brief. We've been from the farms, from the fisheries, the environment, the fly tipping, and just about everything else, and we've gone over our time. So my thanks to you, Steve Reid.
My pleasure. Great to be here with you, Nick.
Come and see us again. Thank you very much for your time, Environment Secretary, here on LBC. Let's get the latest headlines at 8:31.
The Environment Secretary, Steve Reid, has told Nick that Thames Water is clearly facing a difficult situation, and investment firms pulled out of a multi-billion-pound rescue plan, but Mr Reid insisted the company remains stable. A separate report has found the water sector in England and Wales needs a fundamental reset. The Independent Water Commission says the industry needs clearer direction to address deep-rooted systemic failures. German